Hi everybody, my name is Monica and you're watching Studio Wednesdays. Studio Wednesdays is a series where I create, reflect, hang out in my studio, and you get to hang out with me. This week we're working on color. The first episode we were prepping wooden panels, so we sanded them and then we gessoed them. Then the second episode we took this sketch that I did, projected it onto the wooden panel, and then did an underpainting. This is where the underpainting is at right now. She doesn't have hair yet, she's gonna have hair soon. And then this week we are going to apply color. Color is one of my favorite topics. So I'm really excited about this video. Stay tuned. So I want to have a little talk about what is color before we get into actually mixing paints and applying them on the wood panel, because I think this is one of those fundamentals that is the most, I wouldn't say complicated, but that has the most variables, not only in like your choices of colors, but like the actual paints themselves. So I kind of wanted to talk about me developing that understanding and how you then can apply it to your understanding of color. Because I feel like even though I got a formal art education, I have a BFA, so I have a bachelor's of fine arts with a concentration in painting, color did not click for me until a few years ago when I actually took a class at the Art Students League in New York City, and I took like a 2 to 3 week course. And it just like helped every single idea that I had kind of click for the first time. Because sometimes in art schools, and then the way they exist specifically in America, you're taught more about like the idea of things, about the theory of art, how to talk and critique art, how to think about yourself, and not necessarily hard fundamentals. Like, obviously you'll learn basic fundamentals, but in the way that like the Art Students League and places like that, for example, teach, Art Students League teaches like atelier style. So you're only working with like these live models. You're learning as like the instructor's coming behind you and like telling you about what you're doing, and like basically about what is like the formal way to do something, right? And the thing is that you don't have to learn like that. You don't have to learn how to paint or draw or create within a specific rule set, right? That's like the amazing thing about art. You can do whatever you want. However, you may find that there are limitations because of your lack of fundamentals. And that's what I was finding. I'm like, I don't have a good grasp of fundamentals, and it's fine, but I feel like I'm wasting a lot of time. I'm wasting a lot of paint. I can't get these colors to do what I want them to do. And I know that there's a way for them to do it. And I just don't have a grasp of fundamentals. So as an artist, your constant struggle is you're visualizing something, you know that there's a way to do it, but maybe your materials, your understanding of your materials, and then your general skill set doesn't lend to bringing that vision to a reality. And of course, that's always the reality of making art. You're gonna have to make compromises. Like, that's literally the journey of creating a work. But ultimately, you want to fortify your toolkit. You want to strengthen that so you have more choices. So maybe you understand fundamentals, how to get to a certain point, but maybe you want to, break that, flip it on its head, and do something else. And yeah, I think for me, in these last 10 years that I've been painting, I'm going to be 30 this year, it's kind of been a realization that it's like, I do not know enough, and I need to know more. And this is what this talk is going to be about, right? So I think there's a misunderstanding between what is color and what is paint, because color is light. Like, think about the light spectrum. I think the best way to visualize it is when you have a color picker on a computer screen. Think about if you were on Photoshop and you're picking through the spectrum of different colors. Through that spectrum, you're only limited by what your eyes can perceive. So you can pick a gazillion different colors across all of these different spectrums. Once again, your only limitations are what your eyes can see, because through a computer screen, through these light dots on the screen, you can basically create any combination with a good, monitor. However, the reality of what like reality is, or like what these pigments are, is a different conversation. Just like how there's a gazillion different colors on these spectrums, there's not a gazillion pigments. Like there is a limitation to the amount of pigments that exist, like how many different paint tubes there are, and sort of the color combinations that you can achieve. Because think about it from the perspective of, if you were watching an incredible sunset, right? You're watching light dance in the sky. That's essentially what a sunset is like light playing with the atmosphere, with the clouds, with the water density. It's bouncing off of a million different things, right? And you're sitting down in this empty field and you're watching, like literally you're like amazed. You're like, this must be what God is. Like this is the sublime. I am seeing the most vibrant oranges and pinks and purples and blues and whites. Like this is literally incredible. How can I take what I'm seeing, all of this vibrancy of light up in the sky, and translate this onto this random little wooden panel I have, right? I'm in the middle of this field. I don't have anything. What is color? Like I see the color. How do you replicate the color? How do you bring that atmosphere, that sunset onto a physical piece of paper? How can you emulate it, right? So if you think about, you're in this empty field, there's always earth, there's always dirt. So some of the easiest pigments to work with, because ultimately you are limited by what is in essentially a tube. The easiest pigments, like historically, are like the earthy tones. So think about the burnt umbers, burnt siennas, yellow ochres. That's just dirt, for lack of better words. That's just ground up rocks. That's just clay. Think about ceramics, like when you're throwing some clay, like the color of that clay, that's the color of these. Then where would you get that? You can get that from the earth, right? So you can always get the browns, you can always get the yellows. That's fine. But how could you possibly get that super duper vibrant orange, that fiery red that you're looking at right now in this sunset? How? Right? Like maybe you can take it from these specific leaves or these flowers. But think about when you were a child and you saw the most vibrant like blue flower and you're like, I love the color of this flower. If you were to take that blue flower and try to smear it on a piece of paper, on your little panel, you're out in your field, you're like, I need a little bit of blue. I'm going to take this little blue wildflower. Boom, 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 boom. If you could get that little blue to come out, if you're lucky, if it doesn't immediately turn to mush, the next day it would be brown, right? So when you think about historically why certain colors were royal colors, so why royalty wore like these vibrant blue and purple robes, why their paintings were like blues and purples and reds, is because how in nature do you get those colors? It's not that they don't exist. Like we're looking at them. Once again, we're looking at this beautiful sunset. I see the red. Where is the red? And where is the red in a way in which I can keep the red? It doesn't fade away after a day or two in the sun. It stays perfectly placed on this piece so I can keep it. So that is the limitation of pigments. I always say, like, if you can do makeup, you can paint, and if you can paint, you can do makeup, because it's the same conversation. All that makeup is pigments encased in different formulas so you can put them on your face safely. That's what paint is. It's different pigments. And if you're using acrylic and a plastic, that once the water evaporates from the formula, all you have left is the color, the pigment, and the plastic. And with oil, all you have left, all you mix the pigment with is the oil, and once the oil cures, it sticks. If you think about some medieval paintings, you mix that pigment with egg whites. Think about when you've left egg whites on a bowl, that's not coming off, right? So it's the same conversation. It'll make that pigment stick. And all that pigment is in the conversation of these like earth tones. Think about a ground up rock. Really, really, really finely milled to the most fine little powder, right? So once again, we can grab it from the earth. We got the earth tones down easy peasy. We can get the whites down too pretty easy. Like I've seen some white rocks. Lead, babe, I have lead paints, I don't use them, but like we could get that, right? Now the more complicated question is, how do you get these blues and reds and purples? That is kind of like where the idea that though you have like different tubes of paints and they are different colors, you have a red tube, a yellow tube, a blue tube, they are all very different in their physical properties. That's why I say there's a difference between the way we understand color as light. So I'm picking on a screen blue and red, and then the way in which these different pigments and where they are sourced from vary. So when you're talking about different pigments, historically, they would try to get blue from like crushing up gemstones and trying to get this really, really fine powder out of these vibrant blue or whatever color gemstones. But maybe after a few decades or whatever, that blue fades. So now that blue's gone, right? Or maybe you get it from different, and this is how a lot of pigments are derived now. You get it from sort of lab, like synthesizing them in the lab. So think about if you were looking at a periodic table. I'm going to take this element and I'm going to take that element and then I'm going to put them together and I'm going to heat them up really fast, and then the waste that it creates is a neon green. Now I have green, a green thing that I can then dry out, turn into a powder, mix with the oil. I have a green paint, right? So there's so many different ways to get these pigments and to bind these pigments in something so you can paint with them, whether you're making acrylic or oil paint or watercolors or whatever, or makeup, or house paint or whatever. But ultimately you need the pigment to exist in a physical form. You can't, it doesn't just like exist inherently. It exists inherently in our ability to perceive it, but to like hold it and like replicate it is a different conversation. And I bring this up to say that each pigment is going to have different properties. So each tube of paint is going to have a different property. And that is, think about grinding up some fine clay versus a hard rock, or versus a hard gemstone, versus a heavy metal, versus like, you know, versus burning up wood and turning that into like a charcoal to make a black. Like all of these things, if you were to have all these different materials in front of you, would feel different, would blend different, would have different light fastness, which is basically how long can they exist before the color in it fades? How light safe is it before the UV basically, like, kind of think about sun bleaching, when like an awning is in the like a business has existed for a long time and now the sign is like basically a different color. It's a lot lighter. It's kind of burned. Like how long until the color is almost bleached out of this pigment, right? So that's kind of like the struggle with paints. You're thinking about, where are you deriving it from? How toxic is this, right? Because a lot of these places where you synthesize these color from are toxic, right? How long is it gonna last in the sun? And like just based off of the inherent property of what you're grounding up, how opaque it is, meaning how see-through is it? That's why you can't just be like, oh yeah, if you want to get purple, you just mix red and blue. And it's like, which red and blue? And not only which red and blue, because once again, think about the light spectrum. There's so many red and blues. No, literally, like which pigments, because each pigment is going to give you a completely different result. It's going to mix completely different. And then on top of that, every single manufacturer, think about makeup, every single paint manufacturer has their own formula. So you may like an alizarin crimson from one brand, but then you buy it from the other and you notice, hey, it's not mixing in the way that I love it, right? And I don't say this to, like, you don't have to feel overwhelmed, but it's to say like, there's all these different variables that you're playing with, right? And that's why you may find that there is complication in the way that you're mixing colors, because you're not mixing color, like you're not mixing like light, you're mixing physical objects. You're mixing actual things, like actual ingredients, and all of these ingredients will have different results. And for you to have the most proficiency with your materials, that's where the years of just doing what you do come into play. So where you start realizing, oh, I love the cadmium red from this brand, not from this one. I like it's so many different variables that you could play with, and that's what makes it really fun. But that's why learning your fundamentals is really important, because we're talking about like the transparency of that specific pigment, and then we're talking about the warmth of it. Is it very cool? Is it very warm? Then we're talking about the body of it. Is it kind of gritty? Is it kind of really smooth and slippy? Like there's so many different things, because you're playing. That's why painting is sensual. That's why in a world where you don't need to paint, we can take photos of just everything. You still do paint, because it has a feeling to it. It has a body to it. It has an allure to it. It has a physicality to it that you can't replicate in any other way. Because even outside of the attempt to replicate sensuality, just to replicate sensuality, like the literal compounds that exist inside of the oil, like there's literal like earth and metals and just different like compounds that exist on this canvas, and they're coming together to make this piece. That's why you're not just making an image, you're not just making like a photo, and that's why the painting isn't just solely the image. It's not like if you're just making like an image, like that already exists, like we already see. Why would it be a painting? That's the question. Why, out of all the things that you can make, you could write a poem about it, you could take a photo, you can make a movie, you could do a contemporary dance routine about the thing you're trying to talk about. Why is it a painting? And part of why is it a painting is that it is paint, and paint has a physicality to it. That's what you're playing with. And that's inherently what we're talking about when we're talking about color. So we're gonna get into actually painting now. Spiel done. Now we're gonna get into actually painting. We're gonna mix up some colors. Since I use oil paints, I like to always wear gloves. Some of the pigments that I use are toxic. Obviously, you know, just using them normally and safely should be fine. But they can get under your nails, and then I like to put my fingers in my mouth sometimes, and you know, you don't want to ingest these like heavy metals and toxic chemicals, because you might not get sick now, but your body accumulates it, and then you can get sick later on. So I always like to err on the side of safety by wearing gloves. So here we got palette paper. It's a waxy paper that you can mix on top of. I have these palette knives. The paint on this is dry, it's fine. I also have Gamsol, which is a odorless mineral spirit. It basically thins the paint. That's what back in the day you would use turpentine. Some people still use it, or you could use terpenoids, but they smell worse than this. This is still smelly, which is why I have an exhaust fan in my window that's constantly drawing out air. I mentioned it in the previous video. You do not want to paint where you sleep. It's too many fumes. It's not good for you, right? So this is a separate room that I work in. All that skin tones are white, yellow, blue, red. However, I'm going to show how I personally like to mix my skin tones, and I'm going to talk about why I like to mix them that way. I used to do the cadmium red. Let me show you how many paints I used to use before. So I used to use cadmium red, cadmium yellow medium, cadmium yellow light, or this is cadmium lemon, burnt umber, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue. This is also alizarin crimson and white. And I used the, you know, put them all across the top of my palette, and then I used to create just endless mixes of color. And when I look at a lot of that old work, the skin is like grayish, is like kind of ashy, because ultimately what you're making is mud. I was just basically making mud. I didn't understand what I was doing, and I was just throwing everything at the wall. And like if I made 6 little different like like, you know, mix, 6 little different like globs of color that I mixed with different ratios of all of this. Maybe one of them was actually usable. So that's why I was like, I was wasting a lot of paint because I had no idea what I was doing. Now the way that I mix paint is just with taking a few of the tips that I learned at the Art Students League. It wasn't super comprehensive because I only went for 2 to 3 weeks, but I was able to take my general understanding of paint and like use a different technique and apply more logic to it. So this is what I do now. Now, it's kind of just like this, right? I had never used cadmium orange ever because I was just like, I don't like this orange. I like the orange. If I was using the color orange in a painting, I was like, I like the orange that I mix when I mix like a cadmium yellow medium and a cadmium red medium. Like I love that like really pretty orange. Yeah. This I felt like it was like really like the purest, like most saturated version of orange. I was just like, I don't know what to do with this orange. I literally would never touch it until I understood that basically you're not only playing with like warmth and coolness, which I feel like is easier to understand. Once again, think about it like makeup. Think about like the different tones. If your foundation is too yellow for you or too blue for you and now you look too ashy, right? So like I understood that, but I didn't understand like the chroma, which is the saturation. And essentially what I realized is that orange is brown in a sense, right? Because basically, if you have this super duper, oh, these are sticky, super bright orange, which is like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, I don't understand. Basically, when it comes out the tube for a lot of these colors, they're gonna be at their highest chroma, at their most saturation. And you're trying to neutralize it, to basically mute it down to create different effects. If you're mixing 10 different colors, like I was doing before, you have lost control of the wheel. There are so many variables that you are not controlling. So limiting my palette has given me a lot more clarity in color. And I feel like now when I'm mixing skin tone, I'm not making I'm not like in hyper-saturated neon peach tones, and then I'm not in casket ready gray skin tone. Like I can find myself in that warm, juicy, you know, still like saturated and like warm brown skin tone, and I achieve it with orange. So since I have this cadmium orange, and they do make cadmium free paints, you don't have to paint with chemicals if you don't want to. I just don't have them and I don't know how they work. I've had a lot of these paints for a really long time. So I'm going to kill the chroma of this, neutralize this orange with some brown. I'm gonna go with burnt sienna first. Let me put some of that here just so I can grab from it. And burnt umber, which is just a little bit darker and cooler. Oh, all of my paints are crunchy. And that's also why you want to use gloves, because it's like all that stuff starts to get like oopy goopy, and it's just like not it. I'm gonna put some white over here just so I can grab from it. Also, you can like set up your palette better. I had a really good palette setup. I just wasn't good about like cleaning it, like so you don't have to use disposables, but then you have to like wipe down your palette after every time you use it. And then I was really bad, and then I wasted so many beautiful wooden palettes that I had like my colors properly set up and organized on them. So I want to get better at that, but for now we're working on paper palettes. And then green, because that's gonna like change the tone of it a little bit. Cinnabar Green Light, had never used this in my life. Tried it at the Art Students League. You can add so much of this without it turning green, and it actually adds like that like undertone of green to a skin tone that I never knew how to achieve. So I actually really like Cinnabar Green. Okay, so now we got this orange. And basically, I'm gonna just start adding in some of this, right? So I'm gonna go with this. Also, I haven't painted in a hot little minute. So if it looks sloppy, it's because it's been a little minute, but it's like riding a bike, all right? Right. And then you want to use the 2, because then you could use that second one to clean it up. Have this little boop, 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 right? Maybe, actually, no. So it's a little shadow tone. Honestly, I'm just playing around. Okay, these aren't perfect by any means, but at all. But we're just gonna put some more paints on the sides, and we're just gonna keep pulling from them as we paint. So I just kind of wanted to have a few of these kind of like little ones there, and then I can pull from them as I'm painting. So the Gamsol is gonna thin it, and this time around I'm gonna create like a thin wash of color, and then over the next few rounds of color that I'm adding, I'm gonna be adding more oil to it. That's how you get like a juicier looking canvas. But this time around I'm just gonna do a light wash of color. Okay. Okay. So I went and took a little break. The great thing about oil is that you can take a break and it'll still be wet at night. I like to cover it with the top that I have for this container. So I just cover it so it doesn't dry out as quickly. But yeah, basically I went and took a break. I had some mac and cheese. So I had mentioned in the previous video, I normally don't do underpaintings. But doing an underpainting made it so this was like a really quick process. Right now, this is very underdeveloped. I'm gonna push paint around a lot more, but I don't want to overwhelm what I'm doing because, you know, there's a lot of little delicate details and you don't have to get it done all in one go. You can build it up slowly. Right now, it looks very one tone and one dimensional. The thing is that color is relational. So a lot of the time, the reason why a color looks a certain way is not because that's the color of the color. It's because that's it's because of the relationship that that color has to a different color. So right now, because everything is kind of like this brown, this kind of looks like it has like a sepia filter on it, right? Like everything kind of looks like the same sort of tone. So as we change the color of these things, it's going to change the way the skin looks, right? So before I pushed it too much, right now I just wanted to get a layer down. So as I continue to build, it'll start to look more fleshy and all that. And then I can start playing with like glazing it in different ways and all of that. But I wanted to, before I got into all that, I wanted to start mapping out what colors I wanted to use on the bed and the walls, because that's what's gonna make things pop. And then that will help me make better decisions for the rest of the face and the body afterwards. So that's what we're gonna do right now. We're just gonna lay down some colors. I don't have like an exact idea of what I want things to be just yet. I'm thinking maybe some blue, purple, green. So historically, the way that I paint, I tend to like map out like the composition a lot. Like I always like spend a lot of time on like the proportions and like where everything's gonna go and how the eye is gonna move, but I kind of just let the color be, which is why for larger works I've started doing studies, and my studies are actually normally this size because this is small for me. But this is a work that I'm working on, so we're just gonna have to go for it and see what happens. So I don't want any, I don't think I want like any like reddish or pinkish or orangish on directly next to the face, because I want the face to pop. And if you were thinking about a color wheel, color wheels are a whole other conversation, y'all. There's mad different color wheels. Actually, so I really recommend this book. It's called The Oil Painter's Color Handbook. I am still exploring it, but a lot of my understanding of pigments, I've learned about it, kind of like the way different pigments were used in different points in history. I also refer to the color wheels a lot in this because basically there's different color wheels and there's different color theories because of kind of what I was communicating around the way that light versus actual paint works, right? So he kind of says that that the main purpose of a color wheel is to give us a common reference for talking about light perception and paint mixing. For painters, a color wheel is useful in organizing colors into families and predicting the results of color mixing, and also as a tool for planning a painting. Unfortunately, no color wheel perfectly describes all color interactions, especially those that occur when mixing paints. Right? So what's interesting about the color wheels that are in this book that I really appreciate is that it not only like shows like the color like on the wheel, it also shows kind of like the paint that kind of like is that color, right? So if you're looking right here at around this mark, this is actually emerald green. So you can actually go into your paint colors and be like, oh, I need an emerald green or a quinacridone magenta or a transparent orange or whatever. Like, so I like that it actually names paint colors, that you can reference. But anyways, the color wheel that we're all familiar with is the primary color wheel. And here he shows all the 3 different color wheels that he kind of like references a lot, which is the traditional color wheel that we are all familiar with. And in it, red is opposite green, blue is opposite orange, and purple is opposite yellow. But if you do, like, for example, digital art, or if you're familiar with printers, you may know that it's not red, blue, and yellow as primary colors that create like every single color. It's actually magenta, cyan, and yellow. So in the additive subtractive wheel, there's a different arrangement for colors. And then there's the Munsell wheel, which I'm not very familiar with. But all that to say, I like to look here because it kind of gives me an idea for planning paintings, rather than being like, I want this face to pop. I want it to pop off that pillow and be really vibrant. But then I don't know how to do it. But I'm like, I really like the color red. And then I go and paint that red. The red might be really vibrant. But if I'm trying to make all those orangey warm tones that I just put here pop, like create that illusion of separation, I have to go with what's opposite that, right? So if I go into the different color wheels, I have a few options, right? So if I go into like the more traditional color wheel, I just worked with a bunch of oranges. And once again, orange, if you go down, let me try to get this close. Orange, if you're at orange and you move on in, the moving on in is the reduction of chroma. So the reduction of saturation. So as you move in, there's the color, the saturation is toned down. So that's basically where we're at with the burnt siennas, the burnt umbers. That's what these colors were, right? So I took that orange and I brought down the chroma, the intensity of that orange with these paints, right? So basically that means I'm in this side of the pizza pie. If I make that pillow red, I'm just right next to it. I'm in the same family. They're all kind of blending together. But if I want it to pop illusionistically, right, I probably want to go with what's opposite. So I might go with something that's hanging around here, whether it's a green, blues, maybe even purple, but I want to stay kind of like in this family right here. So that's what I'm thinking about. And this is why I like to look at color wheels, because sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming to decide like, what color am I going to put here? Out of all the colors that I could possibly put there, what makes the most sense? And like, you can apply it and all of that and try again if it doesn't work, but it just saves you time and saves you material to kind of come through with a little bit more understanding of color theory. And then that way you can kind of also prove if it works. You may try and you're actually like, hey, I thought this color would make it pop, and then it didn't. And then you're like, why? And then maybe you could look at the color wheel and you're like, okay, wait, the hue is off. Phthalo Green. Ooh, I think I might make the wall phthalo green. Phthalo Green is right here. So I think I might make this wall, this dark wall right here, phthalo green. I might actually start with that just so I could start, because color is relational. So as you start adding in different colors, you're gonna be it's gonna be creating different, almost like melodies, like, because what you're trying to do when you're painting is you're trying to also create movement. Like, think about the image you're making. You're not just like, the quest isn't just, yo, I paint that really real, it looks like it's something like it's supposed to. What composition does, it isn't just like, oh, it's a balanced composition, it's placed well. You're also in the business of trying to keep the eye moving, because think about, you want people to look at the painting longer and longer and longer, right? And when it comes to portrait, it's very easy. I mean, think about when you go to a museum, you're like, yeah, I get it. Word, old person from the 1500s with a funny hat. It's kind of like, it unfolds itself really quickly if you're not really looking, right? But when you're really looking and the artist is really playing, you can kind of have fun, like noticing all the ways in which they're kind of like creating, you create rhythm not only through the composition, but through color, because the eyes move. And that's why knowing your fundamentals is great, because at least when it comes to my larger scale work, I really like to play with perspective, like the illusion of perspective and flatness through saturation and desaturation, right? So it's like you can kind of create these little like rhythmic pops of color where you're like, yo, I'm like looking at this scene, but I'm like, this little corner is competing because it's so saturated. Now I'm looking over here, but then like it's over here. Like you're just basically moving your eye across the whole piece. So that's why I'm like, I'm gonna take it a little bit slow and add it piece by piece, because you're creating a musical composition essentially. You're creating a rhythm. You're not interested in only being like, oh, this is the color of this because that's what the color of this thing is. It's like, especially if you're working off a photo, like the color of the wall doesn't have to be the color of the wall because that's the color of the wall. Like you can make the color of the wall something else if it lends to the feeling that you're trying to create. And for me, one of the things that I always try to create is movement. But that's also because I paint big. I'm used to painting big. Painting small is a whole different conversation. So we just gonna see what's gonna happen. But I'm gonna go with a little phthalo. I might go with, so there's phthalo emerald, and then there's phthalo green. What is it? Phthalo green shade. Yeah. The phthalos are like synthetic pigments that are like, they stain a lot. If you've ever used this color, you know what it is. It's just like the most like oopy goopy. They're just like a tiny bit of phthalo. It's like getting glitter on you. It's just gonna follow you forever. Like that phthalo green blue shade is just like, it sticks to everything. It's so hard to wash off of things. Phthalo emerald is very pretty though. It's like very emeraldy. I think I'm gonna go with phthalo green though. It's almost like gross. Like I kind of love phthalo green. It's kind of like a gross synthetic color. So I'm gonna put that right here. See, it's kind of like, yeah. I think I'm gonna add a tiny bit of white. When it comes to making straight lines, think about not moving your wrist, but moving your whole arm. So keep your wrist stiff and then just move your arm. Painting small is really annoying, but that's what I need to do. They're also just more intimate. I feel like you could just get away with a lot more when the paintings are big. It's kind of like, it's just immediately more impressive because it's like you're overpowering the viewer, versus a small little intimate painting. It has to be like a banger. That's why I'm making 3 versions of this. I need this for a show. I'm making 3 small paintings so I can just kind of like have more to pick from. Because I'm just like, I'm so insecure about the size. I'm like, it's so small, who cares? But it's cute, it's gonna be cute. So this one's gonna be like the most straightforward because it's a portrait. I feel like everybody bangs with a portrait. But then I'm making 3 other things. And I gotta get her done. I'm moving it like around a lot because of glare. Once again, this is oil. It's kind of hard to see. And when I paint too, like I do this too. I'll stand from the side, this side. Even when I go look at art in art shows, like you could tell who's a painter by the way they look at work. Usually artists will walk up to paintings from the side. You'll look at it from the side, from under, like you'll like move around because I'm like trying to see what you're doing technique wise. So I usually like move these around. I also have a mirror in front of me, so I like to reflect it to make sure proportionally it doesn't look weird when you flip it. So I just like to move it around a lot. But yeah, okay, cool. So we just started with that. And then I think I'm gonna put something at this base here. For some reason, like a lavendery, like purple, milky lavendery is calling me for the base. But I'm gonna look at my color wheel again. And let's see. So I can pick with precision. I think a purple would be great because it would work off of the yellowish tones that I'm gonna be, because I'm gonna be adding more obviously as I build the skin. We're not gonna see that this week. This is just like the first layer of skin. So it's gonna have more yellowy tones. So I feel like working with like a purpley might be nice. All right, so let's make a pretty purple. Oh, you know what I'm gonna go? I know what color I'm gonna use. This is heavy. I think where is it? Cobalt Violet. Yeah, because I've always found it to be quite translucent. So I think I'm gonna do that Cobalt Violet with some white. Yeah, it's so like translucent. That's why I never really use it. But I think I'm gonna like add some like white to it to thicken it up a bit. Titanium white is always super duper opaque. That's why I can kind of kill all the saturation in your mixes, like when you're mixing skin tones. So you kind of have to use it thoughtfully. I'm picturing it a little bit more pinky, like a tiny bit more pinky. So I'm gonna add some magenta. Like a tiny bit more pinky. That might be too pinky, but we gonna mix it up. All right, let's see. Yeah. It's not milky enough, but we'll just put it down and see what happens. Yeah, I like it more with the white. I'm really liking painting on the wood panels. I never really paint on panels because I do like the grit, like the tooth that canvas has, that like that fabric has. But I'm actually really enjoying this. It's like you use a lot less paint, I'm not gonna lie, like, cause it's just sitting right on top. That's why I'm also going slower, cause I'm like, it's so easy to like, since there's no, like tooth, there's no like, think about fabric, it's not that it absorbs the color, but it kind of like, all the paint kind of seeps into, the fibers and stuff. And think about light, like it will just kind of be in the teeny tiny shadows of each little groove, versus this is sitting right on top, which is why I'm like, let me make sure I'm like strategic so I don't put a whole glob of paint and then I'm like, wait, there's nothing to like absorb this paint in a sense. Nowhere for this paint to like sink into. It's all right here, right on top. It's nice, it's fun, I'm enjoying it so far. Totally a different painting experience. I can't wait till I start painting more and more again, because it's been a while since I've painted consistently, and I can tell by like, you know, I feel clumsy doing this, but that's why I was like, I'm starting this series because I feel like right now is a perfect time to get better and relearn alongside you guys, you know. But I can't wait till it just flows more. But you know what, rather than like being like, oh, I can't wait till it's different, I'm just gonna allow myself to also just enjoy it for what it is, like, and just have fun with it. Because that's like the thing about art, right? Good art isn't art that is technically good. Like, that's why in the previous video where I talked about how a lot of artists use projectors to get like their sketches onto a canvas, I was like, no one's testing you on your ability to do things fundamentally properly, like follow the rules of all the old masters and all that, right? That's why I say, even though I went to art school, I didn't learn a lot of the fundamentals. Like, they do teach it to you, but they're not being emphasized in the way that like a traditional art program or an atelier style school, like the art students leagues, would emphasize certain fundamentals, because within that there are rules. Like, when you think about the old masters, like these old Renaissance paintings, there are rules. Like, there is a way art, you know, art was artists were, during that era, were more like artisans, in the way that it was a trade that was passed down, like carpentry. Like, you know, if you're a carpenter, you're following certain rules. Just like if you were a painter and you were the one that was making, you had to have money, because art materials were extremely expensive. Once again, we're talking about grinding up rare gemstones to make certain colors. So you would need a sponsor, and your sponsor is who has money during these eras. It's lords, it's dukes, it's people that are royalty. So you essentially are being hired by the royals, or you're being hired by like the church, which had the money to, you know, tell the stories of Christ, and all that kind of stuff. So it's to say, there is a way to do it. No one, you know, you're not getting booked as an artist because it's like, wow, we really just like his mind. Like, he's making really weird paintings about all of his inner thoughts. Medieval art is weird though. But like, just thinking about within the old masters, right? Like, the guy that you're hiring to paint a portrait of your family is painting things, quote unquote, properly. So there is a way that you can learn to paint properly. But also, what is painting properly? Because when you look at what would be considered the old masters of other countries, like think about traditional Japanese art, or traditional Indian art, or traditional African art, like the old art and the ways in which they told their stories, they have a different arrangement of perspective, a different relationship to proportions, and just different sensibilities. Colors have different cultural and historical meanings. But it's to say that, you know, art isn't good because it looks like the thing, like the real thing. And everything that you do kind of gives meaning to the work. So you have to like think critically about, why am I doing this versus that? And it's a fun little thing. But it's to say, you know, you get better at what you're doing. I need to do a video on style too, because I feel like that's always like one of the things that I think people misunderstand the most, right? And I'll touch on it briefly right now. Like, I think people are like, I'm going to find my way of painting. That's how I paint. Like, I'm going to find something that's different and unique. I always give the example of like Picasso or Basquiat, because they're like the most like recognizable mainstream artists for like the average person that doesn't have like a formal arts education or a passion for contemporary art. Like, they don't know who is painting beyond maybe some old school painters, right? But like, Picasso didn't say, yo, you know, painting people like this is so weird and freaky, I'm gonna do it because no one else is doing it. Like, it was a reflection of what was going on politically, like in Europe at the time, like major wars, like the Spanish Civil War and stuff, and also like thinking about what's it called, just like the advancement of the Industrial Revolution, just what he was going through personally in his time, like all of that, making it be so it's like, damn, you know what life is feeling like? Life is feeling like a weird ass face right now. Like, that's kind of like what we're getting back to too as well. You know, a lot of people are into abstraction within a lot of like my peers that I notice, and even me within a lot of my other work, I've started to abstract stuff. And it's not because it's like, oh, you have to make something that looks different. It's because, how can I communicate what I'm feeling? What I'm feeling is not feeling like a beautiful bouquet of flowers on a pink tablecloth. It's feeling scary right now. And it's feeling like I don't know what the future's looking like. And maybe the best way that I can reflect on that is by blowing up my previous paintings, in a sense, by literally turning the way that I worked with perspective, not necessarily in this one. This is a very straightforward, you know, little painting, but like within a lot of my other larger scale work, like I'm about to turn my previous paintings and my sensibilities upside down because life is feeling like that. So that's why it's like, it's not about finding a style and then continuing to replicate it. That's kind of more like what maybe in a sense design is, because you're thinking more about like, you know, for lack of better words, the aesthetics of what you're doing versus like trying to communicate, period. Just literally just trying to communicate like who you are intrinsically through these materials. And like in this moment in your life, it happens to be that this is the way that you work based off of, you know, your understanding of your tools, your references, your skills and your limitations. And that's where your style comes from you working at the thing that you do. Not because you're thinking about, yo, I'm about to do something that's different and then I'm going to continue to replicate it. Because then as your life changes and as you change, your work should change too. And if your work is not changing, it's because you're not thinking and you're not reflecting, you're duplicating. And that's fine too. If you're finding a lot of passion and like, you know, interest in that, rock on. I think I'm gonna leave it in this very like simple, kind of like one, like no shadow kind of thing, because I'm gonna like, once this dries down a little bit more, I wanna like build on top of it. But this is kind of what I got so far for the bed and then this wall. So now this is where it gets complicated. I added one green, right? All right, easy peasy. Green, making that choice easy. I know I wanted a little purple, but now what's this wall gonna be? And that's where you start having fun, because now you're like, ooh, it's about to get a little more complicated. And then remember, you still got the pillow. It's like you making a delicious soup. You don't want to make it too much one thing unless it's meant to be too much one thing in that direction. Unless you want the viewer to feel like, damn, this soup is spicy. But if you're like trying to have a very mellow porridge, babe, why do I feel so much drama? Like that's what you want to think about. Like, what are you trying to communicate? And maybe you don't know. Like I don't have like a particular idea. But I just know that I have an innate sense of harmony and rhythm that I'm used to playing, that I need to channel. Oh, probably like a yellow. Oh, probably like a yellow. Yeah. But probably like a, nah. I gotta think a little bit. Well, let's pull out the wheel. Right? So we're looking at the wheel again. So we got, once again, the skin tones are in this general orangey area. And there is a little bit of yellow too. Ah. There's a little bit of yellow too. And then we've added a little phthalo green, but we whitened it a little bit, but it's like in this area. And then we just added some of that cobalt violet with some water and that quinacridone magenta, which is like right here. So what are, it's like there's a lot of colors, but there's not that many colors. That's why I like looking at a color wheel, because I'll be like, what else am I doing? And you don't have to use every color, but like my own personal sensibilities be like, yo, how can I use every color? And that's why I feel like, that's how I know I'm Dominican, because when you think about like Dominican, like a colmado, like, or a house, it'd be like the most vibrant array of like 30 different colors. So that's kind of like my sensibility, but maybe you do want to keep it all in the same family, or maybe you do. That's why it's like you use color for different effects and different feelings. Okay. I am kind of feeling yellow though. I'm not gonna lie. I think like yeah, I'm gonna go yellow. I'm gonna go yellow. I'm gonna go yellow. I'm gonna go yellow. I think I'm gonna go like a cadmium medium. I think I want it to be warm. And I think I want it to be really like vibrant. And that's not gonna be realistic, right? But like, I wanna compete with the fit. I wanna compete. I want it to kind of feel, and that's where you can get into like creating different effects. Like if you are, and that's where you can break fundamentals. Technically, this is behind and we're also in the nighttime. This should be darker, more receded, less chroma, less saturation. But what if this was just a thick ass block of very vibrant yellow paint? What would then that do to the picture plane? It might make it feel super duper flat versus super like nighttime romantic into the background. So there's different effects. And that's kind of like one of the things that I like to do. But it's like you might want to stick with it being like dark and dreamy. But also this is once again the first coat of color. So I can go back in tomorrow, though yellows take kind of a while to dry, I'm not gonna lie. But I can go back in a few days and be like, actually, this yellow is an eyesore. I'm gonna remove this. And yeah. But it's a conversation. You're adding, you're taking away, you're tweaking, you're moving stuff around for different effects. But like, look already how much like this figure is like existing in a space by just adding these two different colors, right? Like, it's great. All right, boom. Yeah, like what? It's aggressive. Love it. And sometimes these yellows kind of take you having to layer it a few times. So then I'm gonna have to give it a few days. Okay, so next week you guys are going to see more of this finished project, but I think I'm gonna leave it at that. I don't think I'm gonna touch that pillow right now because I feel like that's the piece de resistance. I feel like that's kind of gonna tie together a lot. So I'm just gonna be a little, but I think it is meant to be blue. Like I think it's meant to be blue. I'm gonna make the pillow. All right, I'm doing the pillow. I'm putting the pillow. I'm being mindful of these edges because right now, since a lot of stuff is wet, I'm not trying to muddy up this yellow because I want that straight out the tube yellow, which is like not realistic. Like very few things look like this when you look at them, right? But I love that because that's how I feel. Like one of my favorite colors to always paint with is yellow. Like yellow is my jam. It's so fun. Like I could see why, what's his name, Van Gogh ate that yellow paint or whatever. Yeah, especially that phthalo. You do not want to touch that phthalo. That it bleeds crazy. It's so like powerful. So I'm not trying to get close to that. Basically, I think I'm looking for like a warm baby blue. And I think manganese might do that for me. But I think if I remember properly, I think this is pretty transparent. And so it might be kind of like that, how that Cobalt Violet situation went. Oh, this is the one I ran out of it. It's like this King's Blue. I feel like I might be able to squeeze the last little bit out of it, but it's fine. Either Cobalt. I think I'm gonna go Cobalt actually. cerulean. Maybe cerulean blue might be the one. All right, I'm gonna just put a little bit of each one and just see what the vibe is. Yeah, I think cerulean might actually be the one. I'm enjoying this painting because I've just been remembering, like, you can just make like like basically the same. Hold on, let me grab something to open this up with. I love these little paint tube squeezy things, but you could also use them to kind of like open up your paints, like basically like this. But basically the same issue I was having with making YouTube videos, I was having in my paintings. So I've been having, ooh, this one's kind of old. Let's see if it's okay. Okay. The same issue I was having with my painting, with my YouTube videos, is the same issues I was having with my paintings, which is just basically overthinking, but also like this deep insecurity around like just what is enough. And like, I think there is this one thing that happened with me with art school, which is you kind of get caught in this like thing, in this like insecurity around quote unquote smart work. Because once again, a lot of modern, you know, contemporary American art school programs, they're not necessarily teaching you how to do things traditionally. Like you're not being tested on painting like an old master. It's not an instructional 4 years necessarily. You're being tested on your ideas, on your ability to conceptualize and create an object that kind of lives up to your conception and stands like the test of class criticism and, you know, the historical context, like how well are you able to grasp that and use that in your work. So you're kind of being taught how to think and speak about art, but it's also like, in a sense, an indoctrination. It is thinking and seeing art and criticizing art from a very specific format, like within a very specific system. Which is super helpful, and I actually really appreciate it, and it speaks to me as somebody that's always been very academically inclined, but it gave me a lot of insecurity around following my own personal intuition, because ultimately when you are learning about art history and when you are getting into like art theory and criticism, think about who are the people that get written down in history. It's the people, it's the academics and the people that are in these sort of like circles that they're the ones that write history, right? So it's to say like you're learning a lot about European art history. You know, a lot of women artists, especially women artists of color, the whole thing with them is that they make they're not fine artists, they make crafts. They're engaging with arts and crafts, right? Like, or they're outsider artists because they have different sensibilities or whatever. So you kind of get caught in this like insecurity where like narrative work, like work about you, isn't quote unquote smart work. I think I'm gonna go with that first one, cerulean. I kind of like how vibrant it is. The cobalt is a bit too, I kind of like the cobalt though, I'm not gonna lie. I think I'm actually go cobalt actually. So basically I've just developed like around a lot of insecurity and like this need to like complicate. And that is one of the things when it comes to quote unquote like art speak. Like when you even like when you're in art school and you're reading these like essays and art theory stuff, and it's like dense, and it's like kind of like how philosophy is. But when like you're reading philosophy, you're like, okay, I'm reading this random guy from like 17 whatever or 18, okay, whatever, like this dude is just in his freaking head. Like, of course it sounds like this. He's talking to himself about talking to himself about talking to himself about talking to himself. No wonder it's dense, like, you know. But like with art stuff, it be like equally as dense unnecessarily. Like, this is so unnecessary. And like it is like pretentious at times, not to be exclusive, I forgot that I'm working with wood board, so there's nothing to absorb all of this solvent. I need to dry my brush. There's like this pretentiousness, and it's out of a need to exclude, of course, but it's also to almost like legitimize, right? To make it seem like art is just as intellectual and as philosophical and as culturally relevant and as thoughtful and as insightful. It's kind of like this attempt to create like these metrics by which you can like, prove that art is relevant and important in an academic sense. And like ultimately, who cares? That's kind of what I've been like, who cares? And like one of the difficulties with art school is that you're being asked not only to make the work, because like making the work is one thing, right? You're asking to reflect on the work. All right, whatever. I'm just a college student. I'm barely eating enough. I'm working a part-time job. I'm pumping out all this work. And on top of that, you want me to not only understand what I'm doing and being able to reflect on it when I'm like, I actually don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm just doing stuff because it feels right, but I don't know what I'm doing. But okay, it's not bad that you want me to be able to talk about it, to name the thing. Great. And name it in relation to the terms that we're learning. Okay, that is how education works, valid. But like, you want me to be not only the artist, you want me to be the art historian and the art critic and the art theorist for my own work as I'm like going through these major life changes at 20 years old, right? And it is what it is, if that's just what it was. But also you're talking about something that like there is no career period. Like, we're talking about something where like it really is just life's what you make it. So what are you gonna do? Like, are you gonna make it rock or not? Like, there's all these different barriers to entry within the art world where like if you're like a college athlete, like, babe, if you didn't make it to the NBA, that's it. Nah, obviously you could do like you could teach at a local level and all these kind of things, whatever. Like, there's like other things that you could obviously do, right? But within art, like, who's the NBA, right? Like, you can kind of really make it your own. And like, also it's there, like, where the NBA is always the NBA and the game of basketball is always the game of basketball. The game of art really varies. I feel like I'm only beginning to scratch an understanding of what it means to have a career as an artist, what it means to sell work, what it means to show, like what any of this really means. All I know is I barely know how to paint, actually. I was gonna say all I know is how to make my art. I actually barely even know how to make my art. All I have to say is like there's a lot of like insecurity in what you're supposed to be doing, because even your own professors when you're in art school are oftentimes, more often than not, working artists with their own exhibitions in the same rat race as you. That's why when in art school, you can get some real hating ass teachers, like some real actual haters, like some objectively, it's not even like a racial thing, like it can be actually, but it's not even based off of like some specific like physical characteristic about you or for your life. It's like legit, like they see something in you and they are themselves competing. And whether they realize it or not, like they're taking that shit out on you, right? And it's just something you have to be wary about, right? And like, I didn't understand that. I didn't use my time in art school in the way that you're supposed to use it, which was, not only creating, but also it was meant for networking, especially with your professors, because they are the people in the art world and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, at this point, I was a 20-year-old who never even knew adults that did art things. I was like, my teachers would be telling me I'm doing great. And rather than like talking to them after class, I would leave because I was deeply insecure around adults. Because I'm like, all the adults in my life tell me I'm not doing the right thing. And you guys are all praising me. I don't know what to do with that, right? So not only are you a deeply insecure young adult who's entering a space where nothing is necessary, not a single thing is guaranteed unless you already have connections or you have a certain amount of money, you're also being told that the way that you see and think isn't enough, right? So then you leave school, and guess what happens? Who cares? No one gives a damn about all the things that you learned. It really doesn't matter. And also things change. When I entered the art world, or when I exited my BFA program, the thing was to have an MFA. Everybody needed an MFA. I was like, damn, am I going to have to be associated with a major institution to be able to get into the shows? Guess what the new thing is? It's incredible that this artist is actually self-taught. They didn't even get a BFA. All of a sudden, if you went and got an MFA, guess what? It doesn't matter. None of it matters. Like, it's all made up, right? Like, so it's to say, like, the people that succeed within it obviously are outside of the ones that are well connected and like nepotism and all these things, and like, or we're super business minded about it and we're able to play that game, which is difficult because if you are a weird artist who feels compelled to paint your weird little paintings, you're probably not a businessman, right? Like, so unless you're the outlier that happens to be a super dedicated artist and also a business genius, or your aunt is one of the board members at a major commercial art gallery, what are you gonna do, right? Like, so what you can do is you make your work. That's what you gotta do. You gotta make your work. But guess what? You just been in an environment where everybody's like, hey, that work you made, I don't know, it just feels a little derivative. It just feels a bit, I don't know. Like, everybody's just been using your work, your critique time when you're in art school to just bounce off every single thought they've ever had in their entire life onto your work. And then it's like, all right, your 15-minute for your crit is over. And you're like, what do I do with this information? And then you leave art school and then you realize, none of it matters. None of it matters. So now you have to spend all these years unlearning the insecurities that you picked up from getting bashed in critiques for being the only one that was making figurative personal work, me, and all these teachers. Some of them liked me, some of them didn't. But all that to say, the only thing that you should rely on, like that is like needed to be an artist, is for you to make your art. But I left art school with so many insecurities around my art that I can't make art now. And it's kind of like how I started this, saying the same conversation with my YouTube videos, where rather than just talking about what I want to talk about, and that's just enough because whatever I want to do is enough, I'm here stuck in this loop of being like, I have to make the smartest, most incredible, bestest video in the world, and I have to know everything. Just like the same with the paintings. I can't just paint a simple little portrait. It's not enough. I have to make really, really, really smart, complicated work that shows my finesse as a painter, but also my historical and theoretical references, and blah 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 blah. Like, it's just like, girl, just who cares? And then like the reality is that the commercial art world is not an exam. It's not what you learned in art school, because at the end of the day, the people that actually buy work are collectors. And if you imagine yourself, which I don't because I'm a painter, if you imagine yourself as a collector, what on earth do you want as a collector? Tell me what you, walking into a gallery or into a fair with $80,000 in your pocket, what do you want that you see at the fair? Outside of, like, obviously if you're treating it like from the business perspective of flipping paintings, like, oh, what's a good investment and whatever, blah, blah, blah. Outside of that, what do you, with somebody that got money in your pocket, think about when you look at a painting? What you're thinking about is, do I like this painting? So technically all I gotta do is make a good painting, but I can't make a good painting because I've been over like complicated. It can't just be good. It has to be smart. But it's like, no, it doesn't. It really, like, this is smart. Like, so it's all to say, yeah, just make the work. It's fine. I feel like I've been spending all these years just shutting down all the voices in my head. And I've just been trying to develop a relationship to my practice where it's like, this was fun once, right? Like, this was really fun. I actually really enjoyed doing all this stuff. What happened, right? And it's like I started thinking too much, and that's not my job. My job isn't to think about what, like, that's everybody else's job. Like the gallerist's job, the freaking curator's job, the collector's job, the cultural critic reviewing the show's job. That's not my job. But yeah. Let's finish adding this blue. I don't know if I like this blue. It feels like really like thick and opaque. But I think once this dries down, I'm gonna go in with like some white and like make it super like washy and more delicate, because right now there's obviously like no shadows or anything. I kind of threw out the whole underpainting underneath by just painting all this like one tone, but it is okay. All right, so this is what we got going so far. I don't absolutely love this blue so far, but this is only the first layer, and it's kind of like sweet. It's kind of sweet. So we're just gonna leave it at this for now. When you see this next week, it's going to be a completely different vibe. All right, thank you so much for watching. I had such a fun time making today's video. Next week we shall continue adding to this painting, and I'll also have other paintings in the works, because I have 3 of these that are going on at the same time. So I'll show you guys that, and please let me know what you guys think, what you guys want me to talk about. This is this little diva for now. And I'm excited to see her next week. Thank you guys always for your support. It absolutely means the world to me. And yeah, see you next time.